Our next speaker is Dr. Stuart McDonald, and he's an associate professor and the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research Scholar in the Department of Psychology at the University of Victoria. His research focuses on cognitive aging and early identification of those at risk for cognitive decline and disease, such as Alzheimer's disease. The Gerontology Society of America, the United States' largest interdisciplinary organization devoted to the field of aging, has chosen Dr. McDonald as the 2013 recipient of the Margaret and Paul Baltes Foundation Award in Behavioral and Social Gerontology. This distinguished honor, given annually, recognizes outstanding early career contributions in the behavioral and social gerontology. And Dr. McDonald's presentation is entitled Lifestyle Cross-Training, Your Role in Delaying or Preventing Age-Related Declines in Memory and Health. Dr. McDonald.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I have to say, I think this is about the fullest I've ever seen the room. And the students pay for it. What a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much to the organizers. What I'm going to do is to really focus on agency and your responsibility, what you can do for maximizing the chances to live not only a healthy life, but also one in which you age successfully vis-a-vis your cognitive function. So there's 3 points that I want to mention in that regard. The first is just to provide a little bit of background, and some of these points actually dovetail or overlap quite nicely with ones already raised by Dr. Hofer, so I think I'll zip through some of them quickly. With regard to cognition itself, it actually derives from a Latin term, cognoscere, meaning to know or to come to know. For anybody who speaks Latin and or Italian in the room, your enunciation will be different than mine was there. Most people liken cognition to memory function, and memory is a large part of it. But cognition is an umbrella term that refers to many things. The use of language to be able to communicate, certainly the ability to attend to public talks, for example, paying attention in the moment, the ability to problem solve in the here and now. Cognition entails all of these things. And Dr. Hofer spoke about this a little bit, but this is a key question that people in my field, gerontologists as well as geriatricians like Dr. Williams, I'm sure get asked regularly. Well, when does cognitive decline begin? When should I be worried? Yesterday didn't matter. Today doesn't matter so much, but I want to know when I should start getting worried so I can start doing something about it tomorrow. Well, I would suggest that absolutely today does matter, as Dr. Hofer showed. Yesterday matters to a certain extent, particularly if you have poor lifestyle behaviors, but I would argue in addition to today, tomorrow is particularly critical for warding off decline. Some of our colleagues do suggest that decline begins as early as the late 20s. People interpret this in different ways. Some of us are kind of happy about that. I would say, oh, well, that's fine. The smug and the bulletproof generation are also experiencing declines. The truth is, and the answer to this question Dr. Hofer has already alluded to, is it really does depend. It depends on cohort factors, as he mentioned. It depends on research design, and it depends on the type of cognitive process that you're talking about in the first place. And some types of cognitive function here, the upper curve, for example, references things like general world knowledge. Where's the Eiffel Tower? Where's the Brooklyn Bridge? These types of things. Vocabulary, the development of your lexicon. We laugh, but some of these general knowledge tests, you wouldn't believe what the 20-somethings are not responding to correctly based on these measures. So badge of honor, wear it with pride. As it turns out, these crystallized abilities often don't start showing any forms of declines well into the 70s and perhaps beyond. They typically show stability. Sometimes they show gain. So read, and travel, experience life. Other types of abilities, such as speed of processing, response latency, attention, the ability to remember information and simultaneously use it or keep it in mind for use, let's say 10 minutes down the road. Those sorts of abilities do start declining. For some people, they may start declining in the 30s. For most of us, they would start declining in the 50s anyways. Some brief statistics, not a surprise to most of us. Canada is aging. Apparently there was a baby boom that accounts for about 33% of our population, give or take. 35 million Canadians, I think better than 10.5 million fall within the baby boom category. Today, 4 million Canadians age 65 or older. In about 25 years, 10 million age 65 or older. The fastest growing segment of that group are individuals over the age of 85. Obviously, I would say good news in general. I'll probably mention that a few times. But along with getting older as a society, there are also implications for increases in disease processes. Many different diseases I could have picked on here. Of course, I put up Alzheimer's because it's directly relevant to cognitive function. And I don't do this to frighten people. These are projections, although I think they are reasonably valid ones based on information from many different cultures. At the age of 65, we have about a 1% chance of contracting Alzheimer's. But every 5 years after that time, the risk doubles. 2% at age 70, I'm still not that concerned. 4% at 75. It's not going to get me up in the morning, but as you start stepping up the graph here, you see that the risk is exponentially increasing. And by the time you get into your late 80s, your 90s, it's about a 1 in 3 chance. If we are fortunate enough to live to 95 or beyond, there's about a 1 in 2 chance that we may be affected by Alzheimer's disease. Now, that's based on projections and data collected to date from epidemiological studies. Enter the title of the talk, what can you do to perhaps delay that? And ultimately, I think that's a goal. Right now, anybody in the geriatric field will tell you that we don't have any bona fide treatments for Alzheimer's disease. But there may be things, there are things that we can do to actually delay the disease. And if we can even delay the onset by 2 or 3 years, we'll improve our quality of life, we'll improve the quality of life of our loved ones, and probabilistically we'll pass on from something else. But enough of statistics. So I said it. Great news, we're living longer. Bad news is memory decline is associated with living longer. So is Alzheimer's disease. But this is a question that I think is worth repeating a number of times. Is years since birth really that important? I'm wanting to make a few new friends here this evening. And my view, and the view of that working in my laboratory, in the lab I share with Dr. Hofer, is that perhaps birthdays are simply that. They're just another day. We like to differentiate between this concept of chronological age versus the notion of biological aging. And consider the following example. 2 70-year-olds, one individual has Alzheimer's disease, the other one is a typically functioning 70-year-old. And these two individuals obviously don't differ in age. They're both 70, but they differ on a great many other things. They obviously differ in terms of their cognitive function. They differ in terms of their well-being. They differ in terms of their ability to navigate in their environment. And they definitely differ in terms of a number of health-related and biological factors. They're both 70. Age can't tell you anything about the difference between these two individuals. We need to focus on other things. Yes, age is a risk factor, but a birthday is a birthday. Years since birth is not the critical thing here. We would argue that biological age is, and in some of our research, we do use more objective or invasive tests. My guess is for the physicians, the geriatricians in the room, you're going to be less impressed by what I'm about to put forward here for your consideration. We do brain imaging. We do blood work where we look at specific markers, including inflammation, oxidative stress, and so on. We look at genetic profiles. But those things are expensive, and they're particularly difficult to roll out in very large data collections like we often do. And what we do instead is we look for non-invasive indicators, things that aren't necessarily causal, but still provide a snapshot of one's biological function in the here and now. Enter the gait mat, and here's the component of my dog and pony show here for this evening. Amy Gordachuk, by the way, where is Amy? Is she in the room? There. Amy, please just stand for a moment. Amy's going to be out in the foyer after the fact. If anybody, after the formal question and answer period, wants to discuss the mat further with Amy or several of the ongoing research studies we have on age-related cognitive decline, feel free to stop by and chat with her. Amy, I think, was hoping to put me through the paces here on the mat and embarrass me publicly, but the good news is that there's no wandering microphone. So I've got a screen capture here of the types of things that we would actually collect from this mat. But basically, you can see here, it's a pretty simple piece of carpet, 3 feet wide, 16 feet long, thousands and thousands of sensors embedded in it. And so if I'm asked to, we do many, I hesitate to call it evil things, but we make it more complicated than just walking on the mat. We may actually ask you to do cognitive tasks at the same time. For these purposes, I'll keep my life simple. I'm walking on the mat. I'm expected to walk all the way down to the end, about 5 feet past, so that I don't slow my normal walking speed, and then I walk back again. And while I'm doing this, these sensors are picking up every one of my footfalls as I'm moving along here. And again, some of you are probably unimpressed. You're thinking, I can do the same thing with a stopwatch. Well, you can measure my walking speed with a stopwatch, but you're not going to be able to collect the thousands of points of data in addition that this mat does. And that includes things such as pressure sensitivity for every individual footfall. It includes things like measuring the distance between footsteps. Some of the other things that we're particularly interested in based on individuals' gait is for every step, do people vary in terms of the distance between their footsteps? How stable are they? Do they kind of sway from side to side? These things, on the surface of it, may seem to lack what we would call face validity, but I assure you they don't. And there's the question. Okay, you spent a lot of money on a hallway runner, so what? What can it possibly tell me about biological aging? Well, so first I'll rest on the laurels of a number of existing studies that tell you, well, actually quite a bit. Your simple speed of walking, as well as how variable you are, can tell us about brain structure and function. It can tell us about risk for cognitive impairment and dementia. It identifies people at greater risk for falls. This is, of course, a very serious concern. And it also tells us about your risk for all-cause mortality. Gets my attention. Okay, one brief example from the literature. This article was published in an exceptional journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association. High impact factor, 99% rejection rate. You get the picture. It was a well-vetted piece of science. And basically what they were doing is they were looking at a marker of biological aging, simply walking on this mat. How fast did each individual do it? And they were relating it to their life expectancy. And so this graph right here on the y-axis, these numbers show you on average how many additional years of life a person will be expected to live. These numbers tell you how old they are right now. And the colored lines right here in the meat of the graph tell you about individuals' walking speeds. Sorry, the color doesn't translate very well, but the red bars down here, these are individuals who are in the slowest walking groups. The green bars up here are individuals in the fastest walking groups. Back to picking on my friend chronological age. I'm going to take age out of the picture. I'm only going to talk about 70-year-olds. Take a 70-year-old who is in the fastest walking group. On average, those individuals will have about 30 years of life left to live. In contrast, the same 70-year-old, not the same one, same 70-year-old, but one that's in a slower group, the slowest walking group, has 10 years of life left to live. The difference in life expectancy between 80 versus 100 years. 20 years is a lot of time. Cue the next question. Certainly, you're not suggesting to me that the rate at which I walk is going to have any bearing causally on how long I'm going to live. No, I'm not suggesting that in the least. But what I'm suggesting is that when we measure people's walking speed, it provides a glimpse, a snapshot of one's overall biological health. Why? Because walking is a complex activity. It involves a number of different organ systems in the body: heart, lungs, circulatory system, central nervous system, core, trunk strength, musculoskeletal system, and so on. And to the extent that all of these things are well integrated and well honed, you walk faster, is one typical corollary of that, and you tend to live longer. A simple example of bioage, as measured by a non-invasive assessment. The final theme that I want to cover concerns probably what's of greatest interest to most of us. Okay, what can I do about it? How can I maximize longevity? And in particular, I would say health span. I don't just want to live longer. I want to live in a very healthy state, all things considered. And my simple answer, and I've talked about this in a few different venues of late, is to adopt what we call a lifestyle cross-training approach to living. And I'm going to briefly explain that right now. The first thing I suggest, though, is that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. I would entertain multiple different activities, in particular exercise, social interaction, and cognitive stimulation. And I wouldn't do those things separately. I would engage in activities where all of those things are combined. Why? Because you're a lot more likely to keep doing them if you're enjoying it and they're combined. If you're relying on going to the gym every single day and you're not a gym person, there's a strong likelihood you're not going to adhere to the program. Why exercise? Dr. Hofer actually alluded to this already. There's some very interesting data that came from a meta-analysis by the Ontario Brain Institute where they liken exercise to walking away from Alzheimer's disease. People who are physically active, and believe me, their metric for physically active in this meta-analysis wasn't that high, and I think Dr. Williams may speak to this as well. They were 40% less likely to be affected by Alzheimer's disease. And the current Canadian standards are 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity 5 times a week. I can say in Canada we fail miserably at that. I think fewer than 40% of us in the age range of 65 and older meet those specific requirements. I think in BC we're a little better than the average, but it's still nothing to be proud of. We're not better than 50%, I can say that. And even if you don't buy the link between exercise and improving cognitive function or perhaps delaying Alzheimer's disease, at the very least, we know for sure that exercise will prevent chronic disease such as heart disease and diabetes, both associated with cognitive dysfunction. They'll prevent disease risk factors like high blood pressure and high cholesterol, also associated with cognitive impairment. Some GPs are actually prescribing exercise now to address depression. I think that that's wonderful. And we already saw some data on quality of life and well-being based on Dr. Hofer's findings as well. So the other important take-home point is the type of activity doesn't seem to be a major factor. Most of us, when we think exercise, automatically think running, cycling, lifting weights in the gym. It can be far more multifaceted than that. And particularly if you're sedentary, talk to your general practitioner, but simply getting started on a walking regimen and improving it every week or every several weeks relative to your baseline is absolutely what you want to do. It doesn't matter what your neighbor's doing. It's what you did before and what you're starting to do now. It's exhibiting or witnessing that improvement in yourself that's the important thing. Interestingly as well, some people like this. There was a recent study talking about cumulative bursts of activity. So some people suggest, well, elevating my heart rate for 30 minutes 5 times a week is simply not something I'm able to do. Well, as it turns out, a number of everyday household tasks like vacuuming, sweeping the floor, walking or bathing the dog, gardening, mowing the lawn, all these sorts of things actually have moderate metabolic equivalents. Those numbers represent values relative to 1, which is you sitting on the couch and doing nothing. Anything 3 or higher is not bad. It's a start. Ideally, you want to do it in longer durations, but don't view these things as chores. These are prevention opportunities, I would call them. Okay, I embellish, but I'm not going to tell my wife that. What else can I do? In wrapping up here, you can also engage in social and intellectually stimulating activities. We've all seen the infomercials on Lumosity and other cognitive brain training. My job is not to sit here and necessarily debunk those things. What I can say, though, is that I've read the evidence closely, and I'm not that impressed. I would say the benefits are modest. If you want to get really good at whatever it is you're training on, go ahead and do that. But if your goal is to have that training generalized to improvements in all facets of your life, that's not going to help. And I think the evidence is unequivocal in that regard. What do I advocate instead? Well, socialize. Make sure you're connected. Social isolation is definitely a risk factor for cognitive impairment as well as dementia. And based on the religious order studies, you can actually reduce AD risk by 50% if you engage in a number of everyday cognitive activities. So when we're giving radio interviews, they love this, CBC and so on, but listen to public radio, read newspapers, do word jumbles, visit museums, and a harbinger of success for all of you, attend public performances and talks. It's, you're all going to live to 100. So how do you combine these things? Final point, again, don't do them in isolation, do them together, and Dr. Hofer mentioned this. Dance is one very interesting opportunity. I've actually invited a dance movement educator here this evening, Katrina Pavlovsky. Katrina, say hello to everybody. She'll also be out in the foyer after. She's initiated several dance movement programs in the community, both in care facilities as well as in recreation centers. And why does dance matter? Because it's not unidimensional. It's not a pastime. It's cognitive. You have to remember the moves. It's physical, both aerobic and weight-bearing, and it's definitely effective. We all experience the power of music here this evening with that warm feeling passing over you as you're listening. Dance is a great opportunity. Walking book clubs is another one. You can go plunk down at your coffee shop and you can discuss novels with friends, or you can go out and do it on Dallas Road, and I guarantee you the aerobic benefits are going to be better. Final point, whatever you choose, make it a necessary part of your everyday life. If you don't, you're going to stop doing it. If you drive to work, try biking several times. Many of you are semi-retired or retired. You're getting to the grocery store somehow. Try walking. If you're taking the bus, get off several stops before. If you don't climb upstairs very well anymore, take the elevator 4 floors above and walk down. There's a number of things that you can do to get your heart pumping. And Dr. Michael Evans has a website called My Favorite Medicine, and I love some of his YouTube clips. And he talks about make your day harder. North Americans have a tendency to, what can I buy to make my life easier? That's definitely not the European way. What we need to do, as Mike Evans suggests, is when you drive to the mall, choose the parking lot that is the furthest from the door. Don't waste 15 minutes driving around looking for the closest stall. Choose the one that's reserved for you that guarantees longevity and a healthy life. Thanks.